boom, you riding, you chilling along, swinging and banging that thing, everything going cool. And then all of a sudden, you have to deviate, baby. You got a diversion going on. You got to swerve and go into a whole nother direction. Here's how to do that thing. Let go. Boom! If you ever have to divert for any particular reason, you don't want to just wing it. You want to follow certain procedures. And those procedures, it's just like for having your EPs and those emergency procedures that you always follow in case of an emergency. You want to have your diversion procedures and have it automatic like clockwork as well. And in this video, we're going to talk about a few things that you just want to be on top of mind if you ever have to divert or go to another airport that you weren't planning to go to, or just head in a completely different direction altogether. What are some key things that you want to look for and be aware of as you start to divert or deviate your plan? Let's talk about that thing. Let's get into that thing. Let go. Boom! There may be a multitude of different reasons why you have to divert and why you can't go to your initial destination that you had planned for. But you always want to be planning for these other scenarios just in case. And in the back of your mind, you always want to have a diversion plan that you can deploy at any particular time. And when you go through that flow and that checklist, there's usually about 5 things at the top of that list that you want to kind of like run through to make sure that your plan is intact. Number 1 on that list, if you ever have to divert for any particular reason, you want to obviously start thinking about the immediate heading of where are you going. That's giving you the direction and the sense of where you're going. If you're traveling in one direction and then all of a sudden, maybe due to weather, maybe due to some other reason, maybe something has happened on the runway that in the airport that you were getting ready to land in, so all of a sudden maybe that's closed and you have to divert to another nearby airport, you immediately want to, of course, change your heading. That seems so obvious, but you don't want to continue to fly in the direction that you were going in if all of a sudden there's something amiss in that direction and you need to be headed the opposite way. Number 2 kind of goes along with that. And this is something that can easily get overlooked, particularly in an area where you have to deviate. You may not be thinking about this, but you want to do an altitude check. And the reason why that is important, let's just say you were flying into an airport and you were flying at the appropriate heading. Let's just say it was 5,500 in the direction that you were going in, on the heading that you were going in. Everything was going smooth. And then all of a sudden, when you were getting ready to start your descent, everything was happening fine. You discovered that you have to deviate. You have to come up with a diversion plan because you cannot go where you had initially intended to go. So you change your heading, and now you're headed in the opposite direction. You shouldn't stay at that same altitude. That altitude at 5,500 may have been appropriate for the direction you were going in. But now since you're heading in the opposite direction, you may have to get on the evens. You may have to be at 4,500 or 6,500, but you definitely won't be at the same altitude of 5,500. And whether or not you go up or down, whether you ascend or descend, may depend on how far is the next airport that you're going to go to. So you got to think that out. And when you start thinking about, of course, that navigation of distance, time, and fuel, is the next airport just 10 nautical miles away? Is it really close? Is it really, really far away where you're really going to have to, maybe I climb up to 6,500 and just ride that out until I get closer, and then I'll start my descent. So those are the kinds of things that you want to be aware of. And when you start to navigate, start just thinking about your GPS equipment and all the tools that you have available to you, your iPads and everything else, to be able to calculate, okay, if you punch in that new criteria to that new airport, what is the distance, what is the time, and most importantly, the fuel. This is why you don't want to play games when it comes to making sure that you have more than enough fuel for every flight that you go on, because you never know when you may have to have any kind of diversion. So you never want to be flying on fumes in any kind of scenario. It's always best to land with way more fuel than what you needed for the flight than to be playing games with just having the bare minimum, thinking like, it's a short little flight. You never know what can happen in that short amount of time. You may be stuck in the air a lot longer than you initially anticipated, and you want to have the fuel to be able to compensate for that. So make sure you're always doing that, whether you're flying at day or night. You're going above and beyond those quote unquote minimums of what you should have for a day and night flight, if you can possibly fill your tanks up that high, and make sure you always know, of course, where additional fuel stops are, so you're good for any kind of diversion that may be necessary there. So once you've got the heading out the way, once you've got, of course, your altitude, and you've done your altitude check, you've decided whether you're going to ascend or descend and get at the appropriate altitude for the direction that you're heading in, and of course course, you've done your navigation, you know how much time it's going to take you and all that stuff. Now you need to check the weather, because whatever happened at your initial destination, it could be happening at the other destination. The same impact could be happening there as well in regards to what happened. So one thing you can do, particularly if the airport is far away, and let's just say you've been given the details that you're going to have to divert. You're going into one airport and that tower tells you that you have to divert. You can't come here, a situation has happened or whatever has happened, or maybe the weather, whatever's going on. And then you can maybe check right then and there, particularly if you can't chime into the ATIS or the ASOS or AWOS. If you want a review of those three and the distinction between those three, there's a video on this page detailing them with all the details you need to know about those different weather reporting systems. Link at the end of this video where them links be at. But let's just say you ask for the weather at the airport that you have the intention to go to. They possibly may have it and may be able to give it to you before you even decide to divert there. That can save you some time, because if the conditions are happening there, maybe you have to select another airport to divert to. But let's just say you didn't do that and you're headed towards the airport, and then you chime in and you check that weather on the ATIS, on the ASOS, on the AWOS. Make sure you get the weather and everything that you need there. And then of course, any NOTAMs. Remember, NOTAMs is something that you're probably checking way ahead of time for any of the airports that you had the intention of landing to, but you didn't have the intention to divert into this airport initially. So now you need to check those NOTAMs to make sure. There may be other things going on that you're not aware of. There can be air shows, all kind of fun stuff, or not so fun stuff that's happening, things that's going to impact your flight plan. So you want to make sure that you're aware of that. You know exactly what those things are, so you were not impacted for it, and you just keep right on trucking. These are some of the 5 things you definitely want to be aware of if you ever have to divert. Hey, boom! Now you see how critical it is for, if you ever have to divert, to immediately get on the right heading. Because if you get on the right heading of where you decide, once you make that decision, I'm diverting to this airport, and you immediately get on that right heading, the airplane is already headed in that direction, which is great, while you're calculating the other things, while you're figuring out your navigation of distance, time, and fuel, while you're adjusting your altitude and being at the right altitude, while you're checking the weather, while you're doing all these other things, the airplane is headed in the right direction, as opposed to you were still going in the initial direction, knowing you have to divert, and then you're trying to figure all the other stuff out, headed in the wrong direction. You've already turned the aircraft and headed in the right direction while you figure out the remaining things. That's one of the keys by selecting the airport you're going to divert to and immediately getting on that heading, headed towards that airport as part of your diversion plan. Boom! Aviate, navigate, communicate, and always be prepared to deviate when necessary. Hey, one time, don't forget to like this video, comment on this video, share this video, and subscribe to this channel. I am Donovan Batiste. Hey, this is Leadership Mindset. Big Whoa, a place where you can come for free and fun videos about everything that you need to know for you to become a pilot. Because I want you to feel what pilots all over the world feel when we swinging and banging that thing. Love you one time. Subscribe to this channel.